Jesus freak here. I'm a little bit tired most of the day. Anyway, I had to wait for this to come in. And it just did. There's two very different things here. Here's the first. The last bottle of this lasted me just shy of, well, it lasted me a little over a year and a half. And it was a 2-ounce bottle. This is a 5-ounce bottle. My special hot sauce. And the other, well, you have to understand the limitations dealing with non-Protestant translations. It's weird to wrap around on a paperback. What it says isn't 100% correct. You'll find that almost the entirety of Bibles that say they're Douay Rheims are actually Challoners. This is a Challoner. And I'll explain this. The original Douay Rheims predates the King James by a couple years. It was an obscurantist translation. That is to say, it wasn't made to enlighten anyone. In fact, it was so literal at times that it made no sense. And one example of it was that in Isaiah 5:1 it said, "A vineyard was made by my beloved and Horn the son of oil," which is actually a compound example of translating too literally, because they translated too literally from Hebrew into Latin, and then they translated that literally into English. And this it says, "My beloved at a vineyard and a hill in a fruitful place." This is the Challoner version. And I believe it doesn't say that on the title page either. The first hint you get, and yes, I knew this was a Challoner going in, that's why I bought it. Is that the imprimatur and the preface mentioned the date 1899, meaning that this is the Challoner version with the Haydock notes. A proper Catholic Bible has to have study notes approved by the Church of Rome. so that people don't get ideas. It also has to have certain extra books interleaved into the Old Testament and extra chapters interleaved into Esther and Daniel. The Challoner version is what it is. It is a good translation of the Latin Vulgate, if you understand that it has its limitations. Beyond that, it's a Catholic translation, so it has the Vatican's bias. But it's not that strong. In 1750, plus or minus a couple years, I believe it was originally done in 1748, and there was a revision in 50, and then a revision in 52, something like that. But an Irish bishop named Richard Challoner, who was a convert from Anglican Christianity. Now, as you know, Anglican is the Church of England. And their translation at the time was the King James. He used the King James as a means of improving the Douay Rheims so it wasn't as obscurantist. Alright, on to the build. Focus here. Doesn't seem to want to focus. It's a paperback, but it's got sewn binding. It's sewn and then glued to the spine. So it's built about as strong as any of your decent Protestant Bibles. It's not perfect bound. It's a cheap paperback, but it's not, it's not just, we'll take the pages and glue them to the spine. They made signatures, and they stitched it up. So this is Smithsonian. Now, this was a little more expensive than I think it ought to have been. Being that it's paperback, being that it's, But there's not a lot of competition when it comes to printing Catholic Bibles. So you get into it, and I'm not going to open this too much. Presentation page. Of course, the Vatican's misinterpretation of the verse, I say to thee that thou art Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Only the Vatican misinterprets the verse that way. Orthodox churches agree with Protestant churches. There's a bit explaining the logo of the publisher, St. Benedict Press. Then there's the family record. Preface to the Haydock notes. And you go right into Genesis. Now, this is a Challoner Bible, and the Challoner Bible does have several books named differently, and as I said, it has some extra books here. For example, names are always given in their Latin forms. So, Joshua is Josue. Hosea is Ose, which you see in the King James once in the book of Romans, etc. And of course, 1st, 2nd Samuel are called 1st and 2nd Kings. The numbers of 1st and 2nd Kings bumped up to 3rd and 4th. There's a few other differences in names of the books. Now, the format is pretty similar to what you'd get from, I guess, early King James Bibles with some adjustments. This is a reference Bible. Okay, the beginning of each book you have a little blurb giving like a little bit about the book. The cross references are toward the bottom in each column. And then after that you have some notes, which are actually, they kind of got to be. For example, my Catholic RSV that I have in the other room, the notes are off in the back, and there's only a few of them. But they have to be there because the Vatican requires it. You get through the extended Old Testament and it goes right on to the New. The typesetters seem to be familiar with stuff like King James Bibles, whatever. It's very similar in layout to the King James, that it's verse by verse, and this is another thing specific to Challoner. The Douay Rheims was not verse by verse. It was actually in paragraph form with the verse numbers off in the margins. But the Challoner is verse by verse. It has italics for inserted words, but they're a lot less common than they are in the King James. For example, her that had been the wife of Arias. It doesn't happen as much. Now, the notes are, of course, they have a Catholic bent. For example, they push the perpetual virginity and stuff. They try to explain some of the oddball translation choices. Why, for example, Challoner, and I think I'm going to have to look, but they might have fixed the do penance bit in the Confraternity version of 1941, which is only the New Testament. Words of Christ in neon pink. That can get annoying. After the end of Revelation, now this doesn't have, for some reason, red letter in Revelation, so in this respect it's like Cambridge, which, I mean, I see their point, but it's daft. If you're going to go in all the way. Okay, after you hit the end, there's a historical and chronological index of the Old Testament. And then of the new. Then they try to find scriptural judgments, justifications, but it's post facto justifications for some of their feast days. There's a number of prayers in the back. Watch out! Some of them are not to God. There's a list of the popes in the back up until Benedict XVI. This may have been left over from that time. Couple blank pages, and then you have a couple color illustrations. And then some color maps. There's 4 of them. Now this is a small print, like about a 7 or 8 in like Century School Book. It's readable, but it's not great. They do apparently offer it in full leather and hardback, but this is what I found on Amazon. The thing to watch out for some of the prayers in the back that I mentioned is they're to Mary. Obviously, prayer should be to God alone. And Catholics have a tendency of sometimes elevating the Theotokos to near or even above the level of God. And that can be a bit problematic. In the sense that she was the mother of God. She was the mother of God made flesh. Not the mother of the Son of God from eternity. You gotta be careful with some of this. This would actually make a pretty good rebind candidate. If you keep in mind, it's a Catholic Bible. It's built pretty solid, but it's a paperback. It's built about the same, I think, as TBS's paperbacks. Alright, I've been yammering a bit. I should sign off. Jesus, freak out.